Hey everybody, welcome to Bill and Frank Eat Pop Culture. I am Frank, and with me as always is my friend Bill. How you doing, Bill?
I'm doing great. How's everybody doing?
Oh, just pulling in the end of this weekend after watching my phone for the last 4 days to see all the D23 announcements. It's a great way to end the weekend because we have with us again the always thorough Johnny Beaver.
Yay!
JB, as he calls himself, his online moniker. How you doing, Johnny?
Hey, I'm great, man. I'm proud to be your inaugural guest and your first returning guest.
That's right. Friend of the longtime friend of the show, Johnny Beaver.
That's right. Long-time listener, first-time caller, you know?
There's no better voice to have in the midst of a spider tragedy than John Beaver.
Fair enough.
Yeah, he'll either talk us off the ledge or bring us closer to it. We'll see where we go. But yeah, so we're this show's coming to you very, very closely on the heels of our last episode. That wasn't the original plan, but all the news started dropping from D23 this past weekend, and I mean, coming right off of Comic-Con, I don't think any of us thought we'd get as much out of D23 as we ended up getting. So, Bill shot me a text and was like, "Yo, like we should get on this stuff and get it out as quickly as possible and talk about it." So, we're gonna do that tonight, and we got Johnny to help us out because I'm sure he's got a lot to add to the conversation as he always does. And then later in the week, we'll bring you a go home bonus episode to get us ready for AEW All Out. So, anything to add to that, Bill?
Nope, just that this became a necessity when the news out of D23, I thought there'd be a couple nuggets, but there was way more, and it got to be the point where one segment of a podcast wouldn't have sufficed. So we need the full Monty.
I'm with you. So it's Sunday night. We all got to work tomorrow. So without further ado, let's start the show.
All right, so this past weekend, as mentioned in the intro, was D23, Disney's huge expo. And while we may concentrate a lot on Marvel, there was a lot of stuff that came out of this. Marvel, Star Wars, Disney Park stuff, which Frank is going to be all over. It was really a huge weekend, and this convention, this expo has sort of gotten bigger and bigger every year to the point where it sort of rivals Comic-Con now. And in that spirit, I think after Marvel's blockbuster Comic-Con Phase 4 announcement, I don't think we expected too much here, but we got a lot. So instead of just sort of listing everything and going down in a very robotic order, I'm going to start this with what was everybody's favorite announcement? What is the thing that got you the most hot and bothered? I know what it was for me, but I want to hear from you guys first. So guests always go first. Let's ask JB here. John, what did you hear this weekend that got you the most excited?
I was actually really excited for the announcement about the She-Hulk show.
Oh.
If anyone's not familiar with the comic book, it's always been very sort of like this. It was Deadpool before Deadpool was Deadpool, as far as like the fourth wall breaking and the comedy and sort of taking the tropes of comic books and sending them up, especially in like the late 80s when John Byrne was writing and doing the art on it. So if they go that route with She-Hulk, I think it could actually be really interesting. Now, there's been a lot of different iterations of the character, not always very successful, and it could also be a total dud. But I definitely think it could be a pretty cool concept if they do the sort of fourth wall breaking She-Hulk stuff. And she's actually a fairly interesting character because she doesn't have the same set of problems that Bruce Banner does. She's basically has her own brain in the Hulk body, the way some iterations of Bruce Banner have had. So she's a lawyer that's also a superhero, and But really, it's the comedy trappings of it in the late '80s were what made it a comic book that was worth reading, or at least revisiting. I definitely wasn't reading it when it came out initially. So I thought it was kind of cool. I'm trying to. I think this whole Disney Plus thing is going to be kind of weird to get used to. Yeah. So far, the Marvel TV has been so segmented from the Marvel movies, which I think was really to the detriment of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. in particular. Yeah. And I think the synergy they're trying to go with now should be an improvement and should make these shows more of a must watch. Not that I think the Netflix shows, at least in most of their first seasons, with the exception of Iron Fist, were very much watched shows. But I think Kevin Feige being involved and kind of Jeff Loeb not being the person on the reins of these shows, or at least the ones that are on Disney, is going to be a huge benefit.
Yeah, John, I understand what you're saying. And one of the things that I think the Disney Plus series have going for them in terms of synergy is that these A-list Avenger movie stars, Jeremy Renner, Tom Hiddleston, Anthony Mackie, Sebastian Stan, Elizabeth Olsen, Paul Bettany, all seem super willing and game to be on the smaller screen, to make the jump from the big screen to the streaming screen. And I think that could really help with, especially if somebody like Mark Ruffalo is willing to jump on to 1 or 2 episodes of She-Hulk to get it started. It could really help make it feel not segmented and like the Netflix shows were. So, I mean, that's a huge plus to me.
Well, it's just really, when the Netflix shows first started, they made some sort of overt references. With Daredevil, there was the gentrification happening in Hell's Kitchen because of the Battle of New York. And then Jessica Jones had some references in the first season to, I think there was like a case she worked on where someone was kind of anti-superhero. And they basically just dropped it completely, I think, because it was too hard to align the release dates of the Netflix stuff with the movies. But I think if Kevin Feige is really overseeing all of it, they'll be much more aligned. And I also think, like you said, there's just going to be a lot more back and forth. I don't want to step on anybody's toes as far as what their favorite thing was. But one of the other things I noticed was, like the Black Widow stuff, apparently a lot of it's going to take place in Budapest, which means most likely we're going to see Jeremy Renner in the Black Widow movie. And possibly we could also see Sebastian Stan, because she was kind of aware of the Winter Soldier, and he might be, in his Winter Soldier mode in the Black Widow movie. So and then of course he's also going to be on the TV show, and so is Hawkeye. So there's just going to be a lot of cool things, I think, about these crossovers. And we know that Kevin Feige is better at this than everyone, which is why he's really the only one that's pulled this off, despite many other studios trying it. So.
I was super shocked about the She-Hulk announcement. I mean, of all the places I thought that they'd be going, I never really even considered a She-Hulk as a character that they would bring into the MCU in any way. I'm kind of excited about it. I'm really interested to see who they cast. It's this weird thing. Like, I've always been strangely attracted to She-Hulk.
She's drawn right. She's hot.
Oh, John Byrne definitely drew some cheesecake super She-Hulk, and so did Greg Horn in the early 2000s. So you're not alone, Frank, at all.
Okay, good. I thought it was weird, but yeah. So I mean, that one kind of shocked me. I'm interested to see what they do with it. Like, it's a cool character. It's a major character right now in the book. She's one of the Avengers. So yeah, I'm amped.
Yeah,
about it.
and well, they had it in development as long as 4 or 5 years ago. I remember when the Netflix thing was really going strong, before Defenders came and kind of farted. She-Hulk was one of the things that was in development, and they kind of canceled it. And as far as casting goes, before we were recording tonight, I was on the interwebs seeing what people were saying already, and it seems like 3 fan favorites have sort of emerged as the front runners to play She-Hulk, or not front runners, but we're purely in fan casting mode here, so it doesn't have there's no truth behind any of these things, but people really like Jessica Biel, Rosario Dawson, and Angie Harmon are the 3 names I kept seeing over and over again. Apparently Angie Harmon went on one of the talk shows and was like gushing about the opportunity to be She-Hulk, which was kind of cool. But all 3 of those I think would work.
Like, do you think they would CGI her?
I don't. It's a lot tougher to pull off because she doesn't have quite the same transformation gimmick that Hulk does. So I don't know. I mean, if you Google like
Right.
the Rosario Dawson She-Hulk fan art, it's like I'm in.
Yeah, it'd be nice little in synergy with the Netflix stuff too. I don't know. It's a good question. I was thinking the same thing. Is this something where they have them wear the mocap suit and they and it doesn't they kind of make her taller and then they can hire anybody, or do they need somebody who has to actually fit the requirements of being is she just going to play Jennifer Walters
Right.
and then they have her in the mocap suit like Mark Ruffalo, or do they actually have two women players, sort of like the old Incredible Hulk series? I think it's going to be interesting. I guess, I mean, they're clearly willing to throw a lot of money at this Disney Plus thing to make it fly. And so I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up being CGI. And they've come so far with it too. It looks pretty natural now. It's not like back in the old days.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it was a very, very similar to Professor Hulk that we got in Endgame.
Yeah, sort of a little leaner, a little more human looking. I agree.
CGI titties!
I mean, I'm personally rooting for Ronda Rousey, but I'm a Ronda Rousey mark, so whatever.
I think it should be Beth Phoenix.
Yeah, that would. I mean, if she had any name recognition outside of hardcore wrestling fans, maybe.
I think whomever they pick just has to be able to pull off, if they go the route of kind of making it more comedic, has to be charismatic enough to pull off some of the comedy and stuff like that, as well as the, I think the physical, if they're going to use CGI in particular, is really not as important as and they're so good at this. They're just so good at casting. It's really, besides the ability to see the larger project of, interconnecting these movies, the next best thing I think Marvel is best at is their casting. So I trust them pretty implicitly.
Yeah, I'm pretty much like there's people I like for things. Like I really want to see Keanu Reeves play something, but I've pretty much gotten to the point where I just implicitly trust them to cast the role right.
All right, so should I go next then?
Yeah, your turn, Frankie. It's kind of a surprising choice from JB. Not where I thought he was going to go. Let's see what you got.
Yeah, I can tell you, I was shocked when they announced She-Hulk, and I was shocked that it was John's favorite announcement of the
Me too.
Of the weekend. So I've been shocked twice by She-Hulk. I'm going to go a totally different route here, and I'm going to make you both groan. But what I think the coolest announcement of the weekend was all the detailed information we got about the new Star Wars hotel at the parks.
I knew it.
Dude, this sounds fucking sick. So everybody knew there was going to be a Star Wars hotel, but nobody knew really any details about it, right? So we found out this weekend it's not just a hotel. It's going to be like a 2-night. It's not a place you go and stay for like a week. I mean, I think you can, but I don't think anybody on this planet can afford it. It's going to be like an all immersive 2-day, 2-night like experience, right? So the name of the hotel, we got a name too. We didn't have a name before. So the name of the hotel is Star Wars Galactic Starcruiser, right? But the gimmick name in like the story is the Halcyon, and it's part of the it's Halcyon, and it's part of the Chandrilla Star Line.
Yeah.
Okay, and Chandrilla is it's so awesome the way they tie all this shit together. So Chandrilla is a company that's from the planet. Chandrilla is a planet, and it's actually the homeworld of Mon Mothma. At one point, she was the leader of the rebellion, right? And Chandrilla, for a short time after the Battle of Endor, actually served as the capital for the New Republic. So it's pretty cool the way they continue to just really build this universe for this new Galaxy Edge. Oh, the other thing about Chandrilla is it's the birth planet of Ben Solo, who of course is now Kylo Ren.
Right. Many Bothans died to give Frank this information
and to give us this hotel.
So no, but it's just super cool. I mean, like they showed it and they're building the story, right? Like it won't look like this in person, but when you're in it, if you compared like Eagle 5, Lone Star's Winnebago to Spaceball 1, right? That would be like that would be like the size of the Halcyon compared to the Millennium Falcon. So it's fucking massive.
Winnebago.
Right? A Winnebago. And but when you're on it, you're going to feel like you're on a cruise ship, and there's going to be like all the windows are all going to be fake windows, and all you're going to see is like out into space.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it's fucking awesome. And one of the stops, like when you're on a real cruise, right, you like stop at the Caribbean, right? So one of the stops on this cruise, or the only stop on this cruise, is going to be at the Black Spire outpost on the planet of Batuu. And that, of course, is the gimmick name for the Star Wars land, Galaxy's Edge.
Right.
So, in what they were showing pictures, and if you want to go actually down to the planet of Batuu, you're going to have to like somehow get into these pods, things like they'll make you feel like you're getting into a pod and kind of like coming down to Earth, coming down to Batuu. So they're going all out. Apparently, for the guests that stay, like they clothe you in appropriate dress, so you're gonna feel like you're there. Like Chewbacca's gonna be walking around, and droids and all kinds of shit. So, I don't know that I'll ever see it, because they're saying that it could be as expensive as $1,000 a person a night.
Holy Christ.
So you're not even paying for the room, you're paying like per person, like it's a park pass?
Yeah, because I think it's all inclusive, and you probably get entrance into the park.
I got an idea.
Go ahead.
What if we reach out to Disney and tell them we'll record an episode of Bill and Frank Eat Pop Culture live from the Halcyon?
Oh. On the maiden voyage of the Halcyon?
I feel like it's beneficial to both parties.
Agree. They need press passes for you guys. That's absolutely right.
That was like I just thought all that shit was so cool, because I love it when, Disney World never goes half in on anything. When they put something together, they build all this story around it, and they started to get away from that a little bit in like the aughts. And I think now, based on a lot of the stuff that came out this weekend, they're getting back to that story that kind of surrounds all of their attractions. And I mean, the price tag seems really high, but like I said, I don't know if I'll ever get to experience, but what a cool fucking thing.
So, Frank, is that in Florida or California?
That's Florida.
Oh, that's better. I know the Avengers campus is California, right?
Yeah. So when I first heard about the Avengers campus, which yes is in California, I was all excited. But then I read about like they don't really have a lot going on yet at Avengers campus. Like they've got a Spider-Man ride, which I think is fucking weird, especially everything that's going on.
Right. Awkward.
Yeah. But that's like that's it. They have a Hank Pym particle kitchen, which is like an eatery. And then they've got a bunch of like character interactions with Doctor Strange and Captain Marvel and things like that. So I don't know. I'm hoping it's just still a half-baked idea. And when it opens, they have a lot more going on there than that, because I was kind of like, it's one of those things that's going to look really cool, but there's not actually a lot going on there.
So I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole on this, and there's obviously, but I have heard some rumblings that the Galaxy's Edge attraction has been somewhat disappointing, to the point where Bob Iger basically said on the quarterly call that the park revenue was lower than expected, mostly because of what they anticipated Galaxy's Edge was going to bring in versus what it's actually brought in part because of what you're saying, that they're supposed to have 2 rides ready, but they only had 1 ride ready. So I'm not sure that this whole like Disney's flipping the script and they're better at doing this park stuff, is that really true? Or do you have another feeling about this?
It's absolutely true. So Galaxy's Edge has been a financial disappointment thus far in California. Now, I will say this. The way I understand it, is any given day you can go to Disneyland, and it's not like Disney World where you're going to wait in line for like 4 hours. Because it's not like a tourist destination. It's more of a local like a local thing.
Have you been to Disneyland?
I have not, but I know a lot of people who have, and I talk online with a lot of people who go regularly.
I've been there.
Yeah, like Bill, when you were there, was it crowded?
No, it wasn't crowded at all. And when I was there, it was 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, and Galaxy's Edge was under construction. It wasn't open yet, but the park itself was like, I was shocked. I was shocked at how not like Florida it was.
I mean, I've been there as well. This is more like a decade ago. It's much smaller and much less immersive, right? It's much more like a amusement park than it is like a immersive experience the way Disney World is. It's much more like it's the difference between Universal Studios Orlando and Disney World is like, it feels more like Universal Studios than it does like Disney World, honestly.
Right. And to me, like personally, I feel like they made kind of a mistake opening Galaxy's Edge there first.
I agree.
But I will say that, no, I think the real reason behind it is, I think they rushed to open it, and they opened it. And when they opened it, they raised all the ticket prices in conjunction with opening it because of the anticipation for the demand. But they opened it half-cocked. I forget the name of the ride that wasn't finished. It still isn't finished to this day. Rise of the Rebellion or something like that. It's still not open. So there's like one attraction. Well, stop saying ride. One attraction there. And so you've got increased ticket prices. You've got this big land, and you've got, but at the heart of it, you've got one attraction. I don't think people in Anaheim go to Disneyland to like walk around and be immersed, like Johnny said, and feel like they're, not in reality anymore. It's like, that's a Walt Disney World thing. And if you're going to open a land where you want to immerse people, when it opens in Florida, there will be, so I already know because I'm a DVC member, and they told me from August 29th to January, everything is booked. There's not one hotel room open. So it's going to be a different story in Florida. All right, Bill. So, yeah, I got it. All right, Bill. So, Bill, that leaves you. So why don't you tell us what blew your skirt up?
Well, I came into this thinking like me and John were probably going to bark up the same tree, and I thought even maybe you would, Frank. But it turns out I'm the only one. Kind of going the obvious route here, but I've been waiting for a Moon Knight announcement for a billion years. It feels like. I feel like Moon Knight's been the most criminally underrated character in both comic hard copy form and never getting his just desserts. I feel like he's such a great character that's ripe to be adapted, and we're finally going to get it. I kind of wish it was on the big screen a little bit because I had my heart set on Keanu Reeves playing Mark Spector, but I guess that could still happen. But regardless, I'm so excited that we're going to get this character for what I think is going to be 6 episodes. It's like 6 hours to flesh out who Moon Knight is and where he falls, what his story is. I think he's such a fascinating character. He's like sort of like Batman, but even more completely fucked up in the head, which is awesome. I can't wait to see what they do with it. I really want to see like a great team get put on this, in terms of a director and how they shoot it and who they cast to play Mark Spector. It's one of the things I was really hoping to hear at Comic-Con that I didn't hear. And, we didn't really talk about what we wanted to hear at Comic-Con and didn't. We never got into that in the podcast, but I was really hoping to hear something about Moon Knight, and they didn't mention it, and they didn't mention it even offhand. So I assumed it was just dead. But we got it. And if the internet is any reliable source, it seems like most of the fan base is pretty pumped for Moon Knight as well.
Yeah, I was actually, I think when you initially texted me so just for everybody knows, Bill texted me the Deadline article, went out with the announcement, and I was like, yeah, Moon Knight, I'm so pumped. And then I thought about it for a while, and because the She-Hulk was in there as well, and you know, I am super excited about Moon Knight. Also, for one thing, I think he has one of the coolest costumes ever.
Yeah,
it's so badass, especially when it's drawn well in the comic books, like when Stephen Platt was on it in like the last 5 issues of the '90s run, or when David Finch was drawing it in the early aughts. It's just a very, very cool costume, for one thing, that I think will show up really well on screen, on the small screen, I guess, rather than the big screen.
Agreed.
So I am definitely excited for it. It's a character that has never had an extended run of success in the comics, which is what we can say actually for a lot of these characters they're digging into now. I think my biggest experience with Moon Knight is the '90s run. It was like 55 issues in the early to mid '90s, and most of the reason why I read it was either because he was crossing over with Spider-Man, or the last 5 issues when Stephen Platt was doing the artwork on it. But he does have a cool background. I'll be interested in seeing how much they delve into the sort of dissociative personality disorder that he has, because that was not something that was really a big element of the character in the '90s, but it's one that's been played up more in the recent comics. And it is kind of what sets him apart from Batman. Otherwise, he is kind of like the ersatz version of Batman for the Marvel universe, more so than Daredevil, I think. So, but I think it could be a very, very cool show, and I was definitely very pumped to see that announcement.
Yeah, and as much as I wanted him to be on the big screen, I like, in terms of the dissociative personality disorder, that's probably going to be something that's easier to flesh out and explain if you have a little more time. So I guess that's the silver lining to Disney Plus taking this one.
Yeah, I mean, Bill, I was also very excited about this announcement, and I think like you and I had opposite initial reactions. Like your reaction, like you said, was kind of like bummed. Oh, it's not going to be on the big screen. That means no Keanu. My reaction was like, oh, that makes so much more sense. Like that's better than being on the big screen, because this is a character where there's a lot going on with it. And I think for non-comic folk, it would be really hard for somebody to digest a character as with as many layers as Moon Knight in 2 hours. So to me, putting them on Disney Plus and giving them 6 to 8 hours to really develop who the character is and what he's about, and getting to know him, and I love it. I think I would rather have it there than on the big screen. I think it's the perfect decision.
No, and I think an interesting thing is also, just because he's going to be on a Disney Plus series doesn't mean I mean, if there's going to be this much synergy back and forth, he could certainly cameo, much the way Spider-Man did in Civil War. Maybe not quite that much, but he could certainly pop up in a movie, prior to his series launching. Like, I mean, Blade is the one that jumped out at me. Like, that would be a nice spot for him to do a little peekaboo. But yeah, I agree. I mean, once I had a chance to digest the news, I kind of realized that in terms of storytelling, Disney Plus was going to be a better option.
To jump on that, Frank, because I also want to talk about what you were saying a little bit, which is, I think the more natural fit for comics, the way we read them, is television versus movies. As far as it's serialized storytelling, it's, which has always been television's kind of wheelhouse more so than movies, until Kevin Feige kind of changed the name of the game there. And one of the things I was disappointed by with some of the Netflix shows was I think they actually could have done a better job of saying, like, this is Daredevil's like 2-issue story arc that's part of a larger 20-issue story arc, and that they could have had some smaller stories within those larger arcs. And I think they focused too much, like, this is a Kingpin story that's going to be 13 episodes long. And they could have had, 1 or 2 episodes about like specific things, specific threats and things like that. And I'm hoping that these Disney Plus shows are going to see that a little better, and I think it'll work really well with Moon Knight and with She-Hulk, and some of these other characters. And that's kind of something I'm hoping that we're going to get out of this Disney Plus that we maybe haven't gotten in the past from Marvel.
But Johnny, you got to think, like, the She-Hulk character lends itself to that, because she's a lawyer. So if they do a lot of in courtroom lawyery stuff with her, it could fit that mold perfectly.
I would love that. I mean, I think that's a very smart way of going about telling telling the She-Hulk story and introducing that character and making it relatable, even if she is constantly like big and green and hot. I think it's still a very relatable way to do a She-Hulk story.
So, Bill, I really owe you a pretty big thank you.
I feel like that's true all the time, but what specifically this time?
I really, really am digging your Podcoin app recommendation.
Podcoin is insane. I love it. It's the only way I listen to my podcast now. You can actually fire up Podcoin and get paid to listen to your favorite podcasts.
And all you need to do is go to the iPhone or Android App Store, download the app, and if you put in this special code, CULTURE, CULTURE, you're going to get 300 points right off the bat to your first cup of coffee at Starbucks, to your first Amazon gift card, to your first charity. Listen to podcasts, earn money while you're doing it, download the Podcoin app, Podcoin. I swear it'll change the way you listen to podcasts.
Okay, we've all talked about what we liked most or what we're most excited about. You know, Moon Knight, She-Hulk, the Star Wars Hotel, which is going to be awesome. But as cool as it is to get these announcements, not all of them are fantastical. You know what I mean? Some of them, honestly, I was a little bit let down by. Now, one of the big news things that came out on Friday before the expo really kicked off was that Marvel met with Kit Harrington and that his first post Game of Thrones role was going to be a secret MCU project, and everybody went fucking bananas as usual. You know, most of the world had him as the new Wolverine almost immediately. I was kind of hoping for like a really big franchise character that he could sink his teeth into, because I actually think Kit Harington's a pretty good actor. Then they revealed today that he's going to be playing Black Knight in the Eternals. Kind of cool to see him on screen with his half brother from Game of Thrones, Richard Madden, but kind of a letdown for me. Like, I don't know much about the Black Knight, and apparently this is a character that's been on Marvel's cosmic radar for like quite a bit of time, if you believe what you read, but kind of a wah-wah for me. Like, I really wanted something a little bit more iconic than this character. I think, you know, he's one of the most recognizable faces in the world right now. It's kind of, to me, it seems like sort of a missed opportunity. What do you guys think?
Yeah. So I definitely agree with you. It's hard for me, even as they continue to announce all these people that are going to be in the Eternals, it's hard for me to really give a fuck because I don't know anything about the Eternals. Maybe I'll take a crash course in it and just like read a bunch of old comics, but I read a lot of comics, and I have for a very long time, and so have you guys. And I think it's safe to say that between the three of us, none of us really know much about the Eternals. So, you know, once again, it's like I'm excited about the movie because, you know, maybe it'll catch us off guard, and, you know, like the Guardians of the Galaxy did. But it's hard for me to get excited about anything that they announce with the Eternals, just because I don't want to say I don't care, but it just doesn't mean anything to me. Like, I don't have any connection to anything that has anything to do with it. Kit Harington, I was super excited. I was like, oh man, you know what? He could be Moon Knight. He could be Wolverine. He could be, you know, he could be Kraven. Yeah, he could be Adam Warlock. And then, you know, I'm sure if you were there at D23, and I think they had them all there, didn't they?
They did, yeah. They basically just walked on stage and then walked off.
Yeah, so like I'm sure if you're there and they have the whole Eternals cast there with all those big names, and then they're like, and Kit Harington as the Black Knight, like I'm sure it was being there, it was like, what the fuck? But I just like sitting at home reading it online, I was like, oh, okay, well at least we'll get to see Kit, but I don't really care.
The devil's advocate, and what I keep telling myself over and over again with regards to the Eternals, is that, you know, hindsight is 20/20, and I almost give myself too much credit looking back. But when James Gunn cast Chris Pratt and Zoe Saldana and Batista, like I had no fucking, like, I knew that the Guardians of the Galaxy were a thing, but I didn't know anything about Peter Quill. I didn't know anything about Drax. I didn't know anything about Gamora. Like, I knew of them very vaguely. Now they're so familiar and so iconic that, like, I almost, the past version of myself, I almost give him a little too much credit. Like, oh yeah, I knew about Guardians of the Galaxy, but I really didn't. So all I can hope for is that the same thing happens.
I'm the same.
It honestly doesn't feel that way. Like, I think that's a best case scenario. I don't know. Like, James Gunn already had this sort of reputation for being kind of a different kind of storyteller and wacky in his own kind of thing. I don't know dick about this girl that's directing the Eternals. Everybody says she's super talented. I don't know who I don't know. I'm hoping that whenever the Eternals teaser trailer comes out, because I remember, like, I didn't know shit about Guardians. I was like, what the hell is Marvel doing? Then that first teaser trailer with Hooked on a Feeling came out, and you were like, oh, now I get it. Like, that movie looks like it has an incredible vibe. That's all I can hope for with this movie.
And I mean, I think that, you hit something there with Chloe Zhao. I actually watched The Rider last night, and it was this very, this small budget, naturalistic, sad sort of movie. But, I guess they pick some of these directors, I think they pick, to be perfectly blunt, because they know they can mold them into a Marvel director, right? I think some of them have a very distinctive voice, like Taika Waititi and James Gunn. But I think others, like even John Watts, honestly, like Cop Car was a pretty good movie that didn't have a huge amount of distinctive directorial flares, but they knew that they could turn him into a Marvel director. I even think, to some extent, the Russo brothers were like that as well. I think they're looking for people who want to come in and they want to play the game, and they want to, obviously they also have to fit certain, needs that Marvel has, whether it's, what they're looking for behind the camera. But I think that they're also looking for people who, like Ava DuVernay clearly just wasn't willing to play the game with Marvel in a way that they wanted her to play. She wanted to be very independent from their studio. She took things as an affront that I frankly don't think were all that offensive. Like, oh, you don't have to do the second unit stuff. We have a whole staff that does that. I don't think that's an offensive thing to say to a director. She clearly took it as such, but I think they're looking for people that aren't going to take that as such. And they're going to say, okay, sure. You want to take care of the CGI and I'll do the character moments. That sounds good to me. So,
yeah. And speaking of that, like, I'm a little surprised they haven't run into that problem with Ryan Coogler, who seems like he's a super independent kind of dude. I was a little surprised he agreed to come back and do a sequel, which was one of the, nice segue. That's one of the other announcements the last announcement I think Marvel made was that Coogler was back directing Black Panther 2, coming out on May 6th, 2022. So a pretty long amount of time in between movies for Black Panther, even though, we had him in Infinity War and Endgame. But I think it's interesting they got him to come back, because I feel like he's very much in the Ava DuVernay role or mold, where he's sort of like he wants to do his thing and doesn't really want to be beholden to any studio mandate or anything like that. Although he seemed perfectly willing to put Martin Freeman in Black Panther to sort of make sure the connection to the larger universe was there. So maybe he's willing to play ball enough.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that wasn't, and that we can talk about that too. Some of the things they announced were not surprises because we already knew them. They just became official, right? Like, I felt like Ryan Coogler was directing Black Panther 2. They made it official and they gave us a date. And I wouldn't be surprised if that date is so far out, in part because they have kind of tied themselves with that character to a specific director in a way that I think they've avoided with a lot of this other stuff. I think it'd be hard to proceed with Black Panther 2 without Ryan Coogler in a way that they have not put themselves in that box with some of these other directors. But again, I also, for instance, like the Obi-Wan Kenobi thing, it wasn't surprising. Like, I'm glad it's official now, but we all kind of knew Ewan McGregor was coming back. So,
can I make a comment about the director thing?
Go.
So here's my take. If Kevin Feige comes to you and says, "Hey, listen, I want you to direct a movie in the MCU, and here's all this money," and you go, "Okay," and then you get your dick all bent because you're expected to tie it to the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, then you can go fuck yourself.
Yeah, I agree. One of my favorite directors of all time, one of my favorite creative people all time, is Joss Whedon, and he got his dick bent because they were forcing him to do things. Now, in fairness to him, some of the things they forced him to do were stupid in retrospect, but I don't know. You got to be willing. I think, like you said, you got to know what you're getting into. Like Scott Derrickson strikes me as the perfect kind of like, he's a horror director. He likes making horror-y type things. He knows that if he gives a little and connects Doctor Strange to whatever they want him to connect it to, he's going to get his chance to let his vision go, like to put on screen what he wants to put on screen. I think that's how you have to look at it. I think Peyton Reed was the same way. Edgar Wright, as much as I love him, was not willing to do anything that they asked him to do. And
he didn't want to dance. So he walked away. Yeah,
and Peyton Reed came in and was like, hey, I can make this movie. I can put some funny touches on it. Now, I don't think Peyton Reed has like a distinctive voice, but like he was like, I'll do it. I'll make the movie I want to make, and then you tell me where you want me to connect it to whatever. Like, that's what you got to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they really need to find, like, I think that they've found these certain voices. I think they got lucky with Jon Favreau initially.
Yes.
Being someone who was very game. And I know that, he was a producer on Endgame. There was supposedly this whole kind of like small group of people that were involved in these larger scale decisions. And he was always one of them, even after he left the director's chair. I think it was like, and it's kind of changed a lot, but it was like him and Joe Quesada and Kevin Feige, and I think Joss Whedon for a while, and Brian Michael Bendis, who, and even after he stopped directing, that's why he's still back as Happy Hogan, because he's still involved, he's still producing, he's just he's involved in all the larger machinations of making this entire universe work. And I think you have to be game for that. And I agree, like, Whedon has always been very much, I'm going to go my own way. I remember a story from one of the director commentaries from Buffy the Vampire Slayer way back in the day, where he was sort of like, he went to WB, he said, this is the show that we're making. If you don't want to make this show, then you can make another show, but this is the show that we're making, right? And I think that there's nothing wrong with that. You're dealing with artists, you're dealing with creative people. I understand that. But at the end of the day, this is still a business. And, Marvel's track record speaks for itself after a decade, and these guys know what they're doing. And I think even, they knew Kevin Feige knew what he was doing from step one. And I think that you have to trust that. And if you don't want to be part of that, that's fine. We can do without you. We can find somebody else.
And if you're an up and comer, like, just look at the Russos right now. Okay. So the Russos were music video directors and had directed a couple of episodes of fucking Community, which is a show that I loved, but was seen by very few people. And they got the chance to do Winter Soldier. They did it well. They did what Marvel wanted them to do. And now they're writing their own fucking ticket. They can go direct whatever the hell they want to direct. Like, they can go do anything.
Yeah. The Russo brothers are basically John Cena.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But I mean, if you're an up and coming director, or you're somebody who if you have a dream, like a dream project that you want to do, but you can't get financed, and Marvel courts you, go make the goddamn Marvel movie, become a in-demand name, and you can go make whatever you want to make.
Yeah, but don't expect but I think the key, I agree with you, Bill, but the key there is don't expect to make your dream project
at Marvel
in the MCU.
Right. Feige has proven that, like, yes, you're going to have to connect this to things we want you to connect it with because we have a map where we're going. But if you do that, you're going to get plenty of opportunity to put your own, twist on, or your own style, your own voice on whatever you do. And the results have been proven. Like, it's funny. James Gunn has done such a good job imprinting himself on Guardians of the Galaxy that, like, when the scenes shift in Infinity War or Endgame to a Guardian scene, like, it immediately, because the Russos were like, fuck, we're not going to change anything here. We're going to make this look like James Gunn did it.
And to take that a step further, right? Like, you get more freedom the more you play ball, right? Like, at the end of the day, yes, Robert Downey Jr. was the outright star of that first phase of movies, or this first 3 phases of movies, but who's the guy that picks up the hammer at the end? And who's the guy that tells the Avengers to assemble? It was the Russo brothers guy, right? Because they were the ones that stuck with it. They were the ones, I think they did get to know enough of their vision with, Captain America, Winter Soldier. I think there was some of their blood in that. And then as they got more enmeshed in this universe, Cap, to me, actually became the star of the MCU.
I agree.
More so than Iron Man. And there's a reason why the last scene of this first major segment of these movies was a Cap scene that harkened back to the very first Cap movie, which was, I think, the worst financial performer of the first phase of the Marvel movies, but is very fondly remembered now because of all they built on that. And I think that they were able to, because they love Cap, he was their favorite character, and that's why by the time we got to Endgame, he was the character that became the most essential.
It's the worst financial performer if you don't count the Ed Norton Hulk.
Fair enough.
Which, in fairness, no one really counted. The only thing that movie did for us was give us William Hurt as Thunderbolt Ross. That's it.
I think it's just interesting because I think if you look at it in comparison to the other major things that were happening at D23 outside of the parks and some of the more, Disney animation adjacent stuff, right? Like Star Wars and Kathleen Kennedy have not done as good a job of integrating these up and coming directors as Kevin Feige has, right? Like they've had trouble keeping these guys in line. They've had trouble working with them and integrating their vision with someone else's vision. Regardless of your feelings on Last Jedi one way or another, that very much became Rian Johnson's movie, right? More so than it became part of an overall Star Wars movie. And I think it's why there's been a lot of negative reaction to it. They couldn't work with Lord and Miller, so they had to have him walk away and bring somebody else in. They had to fire Colin Trevorrow and bring back J.J. Abrams because, this is not easy for the studio to do either. And I think that pulling off this game is very difficult, but Marvel has managed to do it. And part of that is identifying the right people to bring in. It's why there's probably rumors right now, and it wouldn't surprise me, honestly, if they actually if this Sony thing really doesn't work out, they may actually poach John Waters and bring him to the MCU to make something else, because I think he'd honestly rather work with them than work with Sony.
That brings us to this wasn't really part of D23, so to speak, but there was a Sony. There was sort of a Sony Marvel update. Both Kevin Feige and Tom Holland were on scene. Holland was there promoting a different Disney movie he's doing called Onward, I think. But he was asked to comment, and both of them made comments that sort of made it seem like Spider-Man's time was definitely over. Holland said, it's been great. I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but whatever it is, we're going to make it cool and awesome. Feige was very much, I'm grateful we got to make 5 great movies featuring Spider-Man. But late today, which I sent to you guys, there are unconfirmed reports, but they're on pretty reputable websites, that Disney has come back to the table and offered a huge package to Sony. They've taken their demands from 50-50 down to 70-30, and they want Holland for 8 movies. Not 8 Spider-Man movies, but 2 Spider-Man trilogies and then other guest spots in various team-up movies, which I really hope is true, and I really hope Sony is willing to talk.
Wait a minute, what do you mean 2 Spider-Man trilogies? So 6 Spider-Man movies?
Yes, apparently. So reading this article today, and I read 4 different versions of it on different websites to make sure I had this straight. Apparently what the plan was after Far From Home, which was sort of like the epitaph to the Infinity Saga, was there was going to be a high school trilogy and then a college trilogy with Peter. And they had it pretty much all mapped out where they wanted to go. And I don't think they want to abandon that. And I think Feige in particular loved Spider-Man. So hopefully Sony has some brains, because, and I even think, John, tell me if you agree. I even think if Sony came to the table and was like, okay, we'll take your deal, but we want you to work in Tom Hardy and Venom somewhere, I think Marvel would do it.
I mean, I think, there's a couple of things here. The one thing is obviously this news ended up overshadowing everything that came out of D23, not by Marvel's, and Disney's desire, but this news ended up overshadowing everything else that was going on D23.
Wait a minute, Johnny, are you insinuating that Disney and Sony may be coming to an agreement to extend the Spider-Man MCU movies is more exciting than Kit Harrington being named the Black Knight?
Shocking news, I know. I think that there's a couple things going on here, right? I think everybody's initial reaction, and from a creator's perspective, I understand it, is like Sony bad, Disney good, because we'd all rather see Kevin Feige make these movies than see Sony make them. No one trusts Amy Pascal, and no one should trust her. But at the end of the day, like this is Sony's most valuable IP, right? Yeah. They have no IP anywhere near this valuable. And frankly, I would say no to a 50-50 split as well if I were Sony. They have a fiduciary responsibility to make the Spider-Man movies as profitable for Sony as they possibly can. Now, I do think that working with Marvel helps them with that. I would also not agree with a 50-50 split. Now, I think that and there's more information coming out about the current deal than we originally had, which is basically Marvel gets 5% of the first day gross. And they also negotiated back the rights to all the Spider-Man merchandise when they took on the producing role in these Spider-Man movies. And that merchandising thing is no small potatoes, by the way. That is actually probably as or more profitable as the movies themselves. But, I think that we all really want to see Marvel continue to have this, to have control of Peter Parker. I think we'd all just actually prefer that Disney just go over and buy it from Sony. But Sony might collapse as a major motion picture studio if they don't have Spider-Man. And I think that they're going back to the well of the same ideas they had back in the Andrew Garfield days that we all thought were a bad idea, right? Silver Sable and Black Cat movies and Morbius and all that, like this crap that we just don't think is a good idea.
Bill, I think you've said Morbius in that exact tone the last 3 shows.
Every time I think of Jared Leto doing anything, it makes me angry.
That is a very, very fair reaction to anything having to do with Jared Leto. I think that you are right on the money with that one. I think that we all want Spider-Man to be part of the MCU, and I think it behooves both parties to come up with a financial decision that makes sense for them. I don't think a 50-50 split is it. I would be interested in seeing if Sony was interested. I think the good thing for those of us creatively who want to see Spider-Man come back to Disney is that at the end of the day, that's what the fans want, and they might have a fan revolt on their hands if they don't go down that path, right? It seems like Holland has 2 movies regardless. He still has 2 movies on his contract that he has to make with Sony, whether Kevin Feige is involved or not. So we're going to get 2 more Tom Holland movies, regardless of whether they're made with Marvel's assistance. But I do think it's a shame that the vision could possibly be compromised over this. I also find it fascinating from a purely just interested in how these sort of Hollywood machinations and back office things that we don't always see coming out, that we're getting this information about this stuff. But I certainly hope they come to some sort of an agreement, because I honestly, we were talking about the Eternals before, and the reality is Marvel Comics as comic books, their cosmic stuff was just never that interesting. And it seems like that's really where the MCU is pivoting to. And I think having a character like Spider-Man keeps it more grounded. Having him being involved in crossovers and Avengers things, it keeps it grounded. It keeps it from becoming like a wholly cosmic sort of, universe that I would prefer it not be.
Well, especially if you're losing Captain America and Iron Man.
I do think it does seem to me that Marvel now is going to split into 2. And I think this has been in their defense, I think this has been the plan for a while, that there's going to be sort of a cosmic path that's going to have, the Eternals and those kind of things, and then an Earthbound path, which would have included a lot of Spider-Man, probably. If Anthony Mackie ever brings Captain America back to the big screen, somebody like Blade is Earthbound. Black Widow, certainly, even though it's told mostly in flashback, is going to be an Earthbound tale.
Punisher.
But yeah, all these. I think that the plan is to have a cosmic and an Earthbound, and then the 2 meet only when the situation calls for it. But I do think it's fascinating, and if these articles are true, and Marvel has already been willing to say, like, okay, we'll do 70-30, then I think that they'll probably, if they do strike a deal, they'll probably even come down further, I think. I do think I think Marvel's plans are much more laid out than we even know or think they are. And I think if I were them, I think they're unwilling to just scrap those plans. So I think they'll make every effort to keep Spider-Man, even if they make a deal. And Frank and I talked about this last week. Even if they make a deal where it's not Feige producing the Spider-Man movies, but they keep him in the MCU, they keep him, interacting or in the same universe as the other. Like, even if they just make a deal to do that, I think it's worth it.
Yeah, you never want to be the one coming to the negotiating table with, the one that's like hat in hand saying like, we really want Spider-Man in our movies. Like you're automatically taking a step back. But, I think that on the other side, this announcement from Deadline only looked bad for Sony more so than everybody else. So I think that right now Marvel actually has the upper hand in these negotiations. So
let's take a quick pivot to Star Wars.
Yeah, that's where I was going to go next.
Yeah, we talked about it briefly. The Mandalorian trailer was fucking awesome without telling us anything.
Yeah, it was visually stunning, and there's absolutely zero plot given away.
I mean, even when they at the end of it, when they show, the Mandalorian, the word, and he's still walking in the A, like, just the whole thing was put together so awesome. Like, it just grabbed you. I am so amped for that show, especially knowing that Jon Favreau's behind it. I can't wait.
Yeah, I think John's point a couple minutes ago is well taken, and we touched on this last week too, Frank. That the transition from Lucas-owned Star Wars to Disney-owned Star Wars, and then going forward from there, has not been smooth sailing by any stretch. Force Awakens obviously was pretty much well received. I mean, there was a segment of the hardcore fanboys that were complaining it was a rehash of A New Hope, but I think it did what it set out to do, which was
bring everybody back.
Bring back the original characters, but also advance the story to these new characters. I think it did its job, and obviously it made $900 million domestic, so I mean, it more than did its job. But, even Rogue One, which sort of by miracle became, as of now, a very beloved installment of Star Wars, but that was plagued by bad production. They had to reshoot the ending. They had brought a different director in. All kinds of problems on Solo. All kinds of problems with The Last Jedi. They had to replace Colin Trevorrow, like John said. It has not been a smooth transition. That being said,
they had to replace. They had to replace the guys for Solo too.
That's what I'm saying. They had to replace Lord and Miller, and they had to bring in Ron Howard, and that's another movie. Like, this is a whole different topic, but I think Solo is actually a pretty good movie.
I enjoyed the shit out of it.
I've enjoyed that on repeat watchings more than I thought I would. I would much rather watch that than watch The Last Jedi. All that being said, like, I agree with John. They have not handled these directors well. They haven't even handled really the handoff from Lucas to Disney that well, because they alienated Lucas, even though Lucas sort of alienates himself a lot of times. But that all being said, I think this weekend was actually really good for Star Wars. Not just The Mandalorian, which represents the new. Like, this is an all-new story. It's in the same universe as Star Wars, but it's on the edge of the galaxy. It's not having to do with any events we know. It represents very much the first step into the real future of Star Wars. While at the same time, even though we knew, like John said, we knew Ewan McGregor was willing to come back and do Obi-Wan, to have it confirmed, to find out it's going to be on Disney Plus, to have him there, to see the fan reaction to him, because there isn't much about the prequels that people are really positive about, but Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan Kenobi is maybe the top thing.
Kenobi!
That was a really good thing. Like, it's that Star Wars, that's a legacy character that they're moving forward into the undiscovered country, but they're also, Obi-Wan's like a nice warm hug from the past, which I really like.
Can I say something? Can I say something completely off base? And you're gonna laugh and think I'm being funny, but I'm not being funny.
Okay.
I mean, I know my natural timbre is to be hilarious, but this is not meant to be funny.
Okay.
I would welcome with open arms and an open mind a Qui-Gon Jinn series.
So would I. I actually think he's one of the characters that is sort of...
And Liam Neeson would do it.
he's fared better as time has gone on than I thought he would. There are certainly, people are angry about a lot of things in the prequel trilogy ahead of Qui-Gon Jinn. I don't think he did a bad job at all. And he's only in, one movie. So like, yeah.
I mean, I think the only issue with Qui-Gon Jinn, and I don't want to get into this conversation, but I think the only issue with Qui-Gon Jinn was just his like completely unexplained, like all of a sudden massive role that he played in the universe.
Yeah. Out of nowhere. But you know what, Frank, now that you say that too, like if Ewan McGregor even came out on stage and said like, he said, I've always thought there was a story in between where I let off and where Alec Guinness picked up. So that's what we're going to get. I think it's entirely possible we see Qui-Gon Force Ghost in this series for sure.
Oh, that'd be pretty cool.
I would almost guarantee that's going to happen. Neeson certainly seems willing to step back into whatever. I mean, I think Neeson,
if it was up to Neeson, I think he would work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
So, I mean, I think it was a really good weekend for Star Wars. I think, it's all, and then have you guys heard the description of the Rise of Skywalker footage that hit at the very end of the convention?
I have, yes.
I have not.
So the big thing that set everybody into a fucking panic was, there was a bunch of cool shots, C-3PO with red eyes, which no one knows what that means. Cool shots of all the characters we know and love. Carrie Fisher. You got your first glimpse at Kerry Russell's character, who nobody knows anything about other than
Rose.
No, not Rose, but an image at the image at the very end of this trailer, which apparently is going to hit the internet tomorrow, is Rey with a red double-bladed lightsaber, much like Darth Maul had in Episode 1, which apparently sent the Star Nerds into a frenzy at the convention, which I can't wait to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've hit on a lot here as far as Star Wars in general. I think there's a weird thing going on right now with the fandom of Star Wars. There's some revisionist history happening with the prequels, that they're more beloved than they actually are, which I don't think is really fair to these new movies. But I also just think that it seems like I think part of the reason why I like Rogue One, and I also agree with you guys, I actually liked Solo more than I think a lot of other people did, is people just really like this universe, I think, more than they actually like the story of the Skywalkers. And I kind of think people are ready to see other stories in this universe. I think it's why Rogue One worked. I think it's why Mandalorian people are really pumped about it. I think when you make some nod to it, but I actually think, whatever Rian Johnson's new trilogy is going to be, and he said, this is not going to be another Skywalker trilogy. I'm actually more excited for him working on that than I am to go back and revisit Last Jedi ever again. I think that these are kind of the stories people want from these Star Wars movies at this point. I think it would actually behoove them, once Last Jedi comes out, to maybe just put this whole new trilogy to bed and say, you know what, this is what people want from Star Wars now, so this is what we're giving them from Star Wars, is new stories in this universe that are not necessarily going to be all about the legacy of the Skywalkers and all that kind of stuff, and it's just more about having fun in a space opera setting.
I do think, and I'm going to stand by it, I think Obi-Wan Kenobi is an outlier. I think fan interest in him has never waned since 1977.
I don't think anybody wants this Obi-Wan Kenobi show to just be all about him watching over young Luke Skywalker, right? Like, we're looking for him to go on like another cool adventure, in between that just, and maybe there's some, like you said, like a Qui-Gon Jinn Force Ghost, and at the end of it, he goes to Tatooine, but really the rest of the show has nothing to do with the legacy of the Skywalkers and with Anakin Skywalker. It's just, kind of Obi-Wan going on this adventure as basically the only remaining active Jedi, with the possible exception of Yoda, left in the universe at that point. I think that's kind of what people are looking for out of that show, and I think that's the way to go. And I think that's the way to go with these Star Wars movies moving forward, regardless of what Benioff and Weiss are going to do with their trilogy, or what, I just don't, I don't feel that much connection to the characters they've introduced in this new trilogy for whatever reason. And I'm not super excited to see another trilogy of, Rey and Poe and all these characters again. But maybe I'm wrong.
Well, and for her part, Daisy Ridley says she seems like she's done with it.
Well, who the fuck wouldn't want to be done with it after the shitstorm that these people have had to endure the last few years? I mean,
on what John said there, what if the Kenobi miniseries is just like Ben in the desert, like just going
masturbating for 6 episodes?
It's just like him going about like the daily routine, like starting a fire, heating up food, going to sleep, and that's all it is for 6 hours.
Making a poopy.
The ultimate troll move.
Trading with Jawas.
Yeah, the ultimate troll move is just like boring desert minutia.
But I was going to say, like, my two favorite parts, I'll say it. My two favorite parts of the prequels were when Kenobi goes to whatever it's called, where they're making the clones.
Geonosis.
Yeah, when he goes by himself there, and he's like on that little mission himself there.
Yep.
And when he goes and fights Grievous. Those were probably and that's just Kenobi out doing his own missions by himself. And like those are the two scenes that stick out to me when I think of the prequels. So like if it's just like him doing his own, underground rebel startup shit, like I would love that.
My secret shame is that I'm a really big mark for General Grievous.
Oh, I don't think there's any shame in that at all. Grievous is fucking awesome.
I'm a mark for Grievous and for Dooku.
I never really understood why Grievous coughed. He's a robot, but otherwise, I can understand that.
Yeah, that's just. I feel like that's purely Lucas being like, "Can we make him cough for no reason?"
Yeah, but he's a robot, but he's infused with Jedi blood, isn't he?
Yeah, and he's got like a heart.
Yeah, he's got a heart. And he's even got like eyelids.
That's just Lucas being Lucas. I mean, that's just him run amok with nobody to rein him in.
But here's the other thing. When are they just going to stop fucking with everybody and announce that Benioff and Weiss are doing the Old Republic?
They better be doing Revan. I'm going to be pissed if they're not. I want that character so badly. The Old Republic to me is, have you started reading them yet, Frank?
I don't want to waste my time.
Dude, they're so good. I mean, it's such a fascinating...
I know, but if it's like, I don't want to spend all that time reading something that's not canon.
Why? It's a good story.
Yeah, I know.
And they've already proven that they're willing to pluck things. They plucked Grand Admiral Thrawn out of the Timothy Zahn trilogy and featured him in Star Wars canon.
When you mix this, can you make a plucking sound after you say that?
Okay. Absolutely, I can. And Thrawn's a great villain. I actually think I agree with what John said, where I think people want new stories, not tied to the legacy stuff. But I would love to see a Grand Admiral Thrawn on the big screen, like a live action version of him, because it's such a badass character. But I think the Old Republic stuff is fascinating. Enough people don't know about it where it would feel new as a movie. I really hope that's where they're. I really did sort of hope we might get some clarity on that this past weekend, but I also understand them sort of.
Yeah, focusing on closing this out. Yeah.
Well, and 80% of the production this weekend was about the Mandalorian, which it should be. That's not only the future of Star Wars. That's literally the launch program for Disney Plus.
Yeah, I can't imagine it's going to be the only live action Star Wars thing on Disney Plus.
No, we already know Obi-Wan's coming.
Oh, that's right, Obi-Wan, right?
But you know what though? Now I'm going back and forth on this in my head, and I don't want to go too long for no other reason than I have to edit it. But
in your head movie,
I don't know. Like, as much as I agree with what John just said, and I found myself nodding while he was talking, but also when I was watching Solo in the theater, the crowd was into it, but by far the biggest pop. You know what, Frank? You know what it was?
Lando?
No, Darth Maul.
Oh yeah, you know what? I don't know why I said that, because I was just thinking as you were making your last point. I want to know what the fuck happened, how Darth Maul got to where he got to at the end of that movie. Like, there's a whole series right there.
And we're never going to see it because Solo bombed. But
yeah, so in Star Wars canon, they've done this. They've given you pieces of this in Rebels, I believe.
Oh, you're right. You're right.
They attached his upper body got attached to like spider legs or something. like which sounds a little insane, but I don't know. Like, as much as I agree with John that they want people to explore, things we've never seen before, some of these legacy characters, and like John says, a lot of them tend to be from the prequel trilogy, which is weird. But a lot of these legacy characters really get a nice reaction from people.
Because one of the biggest crimes of the prequel trilogy, I think, was eliminating Darth Maul too quick. Okay. And I think there was a lot of really good ideas in the prequels. There was a lot of really cool characters, but the I don't even know what's the word I'm looking for. The clumsiness of the storytelling and the dialogue, and Hayden Christensen just fucking cast a friggin' Maul over the whole thing.
Well, I mean, I think that, I don't think there's anything wrong with having nods to it, right? So obviously at some point, Obi-Wan Kenobi is going to be connected to the rebellion. And if they want to have a Jimmy Smits cameo, where, he contacts Jimmy Smits about starting to get Alderaan involved, but I just don't want that to be the basis for the whole thing, is like Obi-Wan just taking care of Skywalkers and planning for the future, right? Like, I wanted to have his own adventure. That's core. I think having like a cameo or a nod or something like that, I just think people are ready to be away from like the Skywalkers are the be all end all of this story, right? I think part of the reason why Solo worked is one, Han Solo, I think, is actually a more beloved character than Luke Skywalker is at this point. But two, absolutely, it was still its own adventure that had very little to do with it. It was just, and I think one of the things that got hammered on critically, and one of the things that honestly I wasn't so keen on, was like, do I really need to know how Han got every single thing that he got before A New Hope? Like, probably not. I don't need all of that information.
Right,
like, it's cool to know some of this stuff, but I don't really need to know like how he got his blaster and how he got his this and how he got his that, right? Like, I wanted to see him meet up with Chewie. I want to see him get the Millennium Falcon. I want to see him meet Lando. But those don't have to be the be-all, end-all of the story, right? And I think that, the Mandalorian, right, it's pulling things, bits and pieces from the original trilogy, with Boba Fett, and it's got the other bounty hunter from Empire Strikes Back, which I guess Taika Waititi is playing. So like, there's nothing wrong with that. I just don't want to be the whole story anymore, honestly, to be around the Skywalkers and the legacy of the Skywalkers, I guess, is kind of where I'm coming from. I think those are the weakest parts of the prequel trilogy too, is, like you said, a lot of the Obi-Wan stuff has very little to do with, the story of Anakin becoming Darth Vader, and those are the weakest parts of the prequel trilogy.
Yeah, and I think, like Frank said, I think you could tell a Maul story and not have it be to do with anything.
Yeah, having him be the Red leader of the Red Dawn and all this stuff is fine. Yeah, it's interesting, and I think it's I think there's a lot of stuff to explore in this universe that's not around fighting the Empire.
And honestly, that's why I enjoyed the Clone Wars and Rebels so much, because it had literally nothing to do with the Skywalkers at all. They're not even mentioned.
I know.
So, and there's so many cool characters that I've learned about a lot of them because I play the damn game on my phone, Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes. But, I've learned a lot about these. They've introduced so many different characters on the in an animated version that I think would be really cool to explore in a live action setting. But we'll see. We'll see where they go.
Can we take a minute to kind of go around the horn here and mention things that were announced this weekend that we don't give a shit about?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of did with Kit Harrington a little bit, but yeah, we can go further.
No, but you give a little bit of a shit. I mean, but
yeah, a little bit. I mean,
like, you were just like, who fucking cares?
Yeah, okay. I mean, one jumps out and punches me right in the face, and I'm sure it's going to be.
So mine is the High School Musical series.
That's not where I thought you were going with that.
I do not fucking care.
Was that like a big deal?
To some people, I think. It's not. I mean, I guess there's a generation that those movies were like a big fucking deal. I don't know.
Then they launched Zac Efron?
Yeah, it launched Efron and Tisdale and Hudgens. Yeah. I mean, I love Zac Efron, but I don't fucking care about High School Musical at all. And it was like a big deal when they announced it. I think that was like Thursday or Friday. And the cast came out and like sang like the classic song, and And there's going to be a fucking series on Disney Plus, a High School Musical series. So yeah, I just High School Musical the series, don't fucking care.
I thought The Descendants was like the new thing.
Well, yeah, that is. I don't know. I don't watch any of them. So
I just watched The Descendants 3 with my daughter, so I know all about them.
That must have been painful.
I found myself like sort of strangely getting into it a little bit.
Yeah, I always feel like if I had kids, I'd be like super excited to introduce them to all the things that I like. But I have a feeling it'd be more like what you're talking about, where you're forced to watch things that you don't really like because the kids are into it.
All right, Johnny. So what was your I don't give a shit announcement this weekend?
Well, I was thinking more like in the line of things we care about, but announcements within those things we care about that we don't really care about. Because obviously, I mean, like, yeah, I like Emma Stone, but I really don't care about Cruella de Vil. But
yeah,
I pretty much just shrugged and said, hey, Kat Denning's got nice boobs, but I really don't care that she's going to be in WandaVision or Randall Park for that matter. So
yeah, they made a big deal of Cruella, and I couldn't give a shit.
All right, Bill, how about you?
So the big one for me, which we haven't talked about, even though we covered everything else from Marvel, is I know it's not going to come off well, especially with what the moment in time we're living in right now. But I could give two flying fucks about Kamala Khan, Miss Marvel. I don't care.
I'm glad you touched that one rather than me, because I wasn't going to go anywhere near it. But yeah, I'm glad. So I'm glad somebody else brought it up.
I mean, I get it. She's Muslim. She's female. I get it. But like, it always felt like that character was created to serve a purpose rather than like because they had a legit reason to create. I don't know. I don't care. Like, I don't care at all. There are literally 5,000 characters I would rather see get a Disney Plus series than that character. I understand why they're doing it. I understand the time and place we're living in. I'm already sort of dreading that it's going to be Mindy Kaling, but I just don't.
I mean, I don't care either. I don't really know much about the character. I don't read anything with her in it. I don't plan on it. I will say this though, this is one of those things where sometimes you have to step back as, a 40-year-old white male and say, hey, not everything on the planet is being created and written for me. My daughter, Isabel, reads she doesn't read Miss Marvel, but she reads Champions, and she loves Kamala Khan.
I know. I mean, I understand that it was a big deal that she was the first Muslim character. Like, I get it. I don't know. To me, I don't want to come off as like such an asshole here, but like, to me, her character is like she's sort of the manifestation of that like forced woman moment in Endgame.
Yeah, I agree. I agree, and I know it's going to come off and sound worse than it's meant to. I never took the time to get to know the character. I don't know. I don't know enough to comment. But it's not for me. Like, I don't see that book on the shelf and go, ooh, I got to pick that baby up and read it. That looks interesting. It's just, it doesn't call to me, and that's okay. Like,
yeah, in fairness, I'm shitting on it and I don't care about it. And in their defense, I haven't really given it much of a chance. Like, John, if anybody would know, you would. Does she have any actual relationship with Carol Danvers in the book?
I mean, her origin, she's an Inhuman. So she was affected by the Terrigen Mist, and that's how she got her powers. But, when Carol became Captain Marvel, she kind of bestowed the mantle of Ms. Marvel onto Kamala. It was like one in the first 10 issues or so. But, I'm just going to be very blunt here, right? Like, I mean, I haven't read a ton of this stuff, but I read some of it, enough to know that, like, to be perfectly frank, her distinguishing characteristics are that she's Muslim and a girl, right? And that's not an interesting character. And that has nothing to do with, whether we need characters like this, but characters like this have to have additional qualities beyond that. And I'm also, to be, again, very blunt, I have very little interest in another marketing campaign like the Captain Marvel marketing campaign. Like, I don't want people telling me that I have to go watch this show because she's Muslim and she's a girl. And as long as that's not the case and they build an interesting character, I'll give it a shot. But I don't want to be told like I have to give it a shot because it's like some sort of moral requirement to do so.
Or you're a bad person if you're not
exactly.
And I guess that's what it is to me. It's like, it's okay that I'm not into it. Like, that doesn't make me a bad person that I'm just not into it. I'm not into it because I hate women or because I hate Muslims. I'm just not. I'm not into it. Like, I don't hate women and Muslims, by the way, but I'm just not into it, and that's okay. That doesn't make me a bad person, but it feels like this is one of those things out there in the zeitgeist right now, Kamala Khan and Miss Marvel, that everybody's afraid to say they're not into.
Yeah.
No, but they talk with their wallets because they don't buy it because it ships 20,000 units a month. It's popular in certain circles that makes it seem more popular than it actually is.
Yeah, like I said, I think there are a million characters that are more interesting, and it's not because they're white males or anything like that. It's just because they're more interesting characters. That's it.
Listen, I've said this type of thing before. However, I am super happy that there's a character out there that my 11-year-old daughter can read and feel a connection to, and it makes her want to pick up another comic book. So in that regard, it's great. It's just not for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And that may be, and it may end up being a huge hit. And like John said, they may end up crafting a really good show that has a really cool character, and I'll be wrong. And I'm more than happy to be wrong. John mentioned earlier, let's take the macro look at D23 and about how it's become sort of this big thing.
Actually, since I'm the Disney guy here, can I start it? Because
please.
So here's the thing: this used to be a thing that only like super nerdy Disney people went to, big time Disney parks fans like myself, Disney movie fans. This is now, you mentioned it earlier, turned into something that has the potential with all the IPs that Disney owns to put up a fight with San Diego Comic-Con.
And Comic-Con used to be the same thing for comic nerds.
So after, my wife, Mary, has also been very in tune with the announcements coming out this week from D23. I think there's a damn good chance that it's every 2 years in 2021. I think we're going to go because it seems like so much fun. I mean, imagine being at a place where, you could sit and listen to people talk about Star Wars all day, and then Ewan McGregor walks out on stage, or you could sit and listen to people talk about the Marvel Cinematic Universe all day, and then Kit Harrington walks out on stage. So, and then you can go next door and sit through a panel about all the new shit they're going to be doing at the Disney parks. I think this year is definitely, without a doubt. I mean, I've been aware of it in the past because it's where a lot of new parks information comes from. But this year, they took it to another level, and it's definitely on my radar. The next time it comes, I'm going to try to get tickets and go. I think it's an awesome thing. I mean, there's a lot of shit that goes on there that I could give two fucks about, but yeah, I mean, I think it's great.
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially Comic-Con now. I mean, Disney is a big enough thing with enough IPs that it can be Comic-Con. Comic-Con still has more. It still has more breadth because it has. I mean, Comic-Con really has panels for fucking everything. But D23 is actually a little bit more sort of streamlined for the nerd, kind of. Like Comic-Con, you'll get, Big Bang Theory was at Comic-Con and stuff that's very mainstream. D23 is mainstream, but also very focused.
Yeah, like you can go and you guys wouldn't give a shit about this, but to me, I would sit there and stare at it for 15 minutes. One year they had, the Dreamfinder showed up, and this year they had, for all the new attractions, they had the new uniforms that the cast members will be wearing that work at those attractions. I love that shit. They have old, animatronics from old rides that don't exist anymore. They had the robot butler there one year from Horizons. I would nerd out so hard at this thing. So, I mean, there's a whole nother side of it to me that wouldn't even interest you guys.
And I feel that way. I've always wanted to go to. I mean, Star Wars Celebration is the same thing. I've always wanted to go. Obviously, that's only one IP, but that's where you go, and there's every corner of the Star Wars universe is sort of explored. And that's you see Harrison Ford at those things, which is unbelievable.
So I think where I was thinking is more like there's no off season for this stuff anymore. I mean, the San Diego Comic-Con was what, 3 weeks ago? I mean, it's and even 6 years ago with Guardians of the Galaxy, or what, 6-7 years ago, right? Like, yeah, oh, cool. Andy Dwyer is going to be the star of it, and you just like hear that in a press release, and then you see the trailer and you get super pumped for Guardians of the Galaxy. Now it's like we're supposed to be super excited for every one of these casting announcements. And I was going to go the other way and say, like, honestly, I think it would behoove them to take a step back from this constant, like, everything is an event, we have to be on all the time, we got to be releasing stuff on Twitter, and Comic-Con, part of the reason why D23 became the big thing was Comic-Con was becoming kind of passe, right? That I remember something like 3 years ago, they said, like, is Comic-Con dying? It was mostly television stuff. Marvel wasn't going. They were going to do all their announcements at D23. But, I think more broadly, I was just thinking more that, it's kind of taken this weird turn where we need this constant flow of information about these movies, and that just announcing that Kit Harington is going to be in the Eternals is supposed to make us super excited for the Eternals. Whereas, when Guardians of the Galaxy, we were looking at it in a similar vein that, it was a property that no one knew anything about. And that first trailer was what got us super pumped. It was a great marketing tactic that got us into it. I got to say, like, just saying that, John Stark is going to be in something is not necessarily going to get me super pumped to see the movie at this point. And I needed a little more than that from this, and I trust Marvel implicitly to make good movies. I don't trust Lucasfilm in the same way that I trust Marvel to make good movies, but the expectation that we're just all going to be super excited by casting announcements and, somebody talking for a little while, I think is something that maybe is actually not in the best interest of these studios. And I think there should be more, if you're going to come to D23, J.J. Abrams, come with a trailer or don't come at all, is my kind of position on that. If you're not ready to bring a Last Jedi trailer, then don't bother, because we want it to be big, real news about Last Jedi. And it seemed like he wasn't really ready to be there yet. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But then, maybe we're just going to pass on Last Jedi for now. And I've clearly had some footage and things like that. But, it's just like this weird, and sports has become the same way, right? Where, the off season is never an off season. We're just looking at trade transactions and things like that. And I think maybe, it's kind of exhausting as a fan to constantly have to be on for all this stuff. And I'd rather they kind of maybe be a little more even keeled about it. And also I think it detracts from the excitement of the trailers and things like that when they do come out, because we've already kind of heard all these things about it. But
I agree to a certain extent with that. Although, I mean, Marvel, Feige in particular, like, God, he kept Phase 4 tied up. Like, he would not say a word about it, even though he got asked I don't know if it's really the company's fault or our fault. Like, fans are constantly badgering him to tell him what's next. And to his credit, he was like, I'm going to tell you what's in Phase 4 after Far From Home, and not a minute before. And obviously fans are so nuts now. They go to Budapest and take photos of movies in production, so we kind of know what's coming before they officially announce it, which isn't their fault. Like, Marvel held their announcements to Comic-Con and D23. And I mean, that's only really two things throughout the whole year. It's not their fault that we have now become technology is so crazy and social media is so crazy. They can't really do anything in secret anymore. It's a lot like wrestling. There's no kayfabe anymore. There's no behind the curtain. Like, everything, we have to adapt to this world where everything is visible now. Like, it's almost
kayfabe is dead.
Yeah, it's almost impossible for Marvel even though Guardians of the Galaxy was only 6 years ago, it's almost impossible to pull that off anymore. Like, by the time they're ready to release a trailer, we've already seen like 20 set photos, and we know who's doing this and who's doing that, and we know what movie's coming next. And they try as hard as they can to keep everything secret. And the fact that they managed to pull Mahershala Ali off at the end of Comic-Con with not a word, not a whisper being said about that was sort of amazing. Like, it's unfortunate. Like, we know you can read now descriptions of some of the big action sequences that are in Black Widow because people go to the fucking set and take pictures. Like, it's annoying.
So, Johnny, reacting to what you said, and I get what you're saying, and I don't totally disagree. D23, however, is only happens once every 2 years, and D23 is the official fan club of the Walt Disney Company. So this is an event that's put on, and the only way you can get tickets is if you're a member of D23. So it's, what people like, kind of like what Bill said, what bloggers and vloggers and the media and us making this podcast make of that. I mean, that's not their fault. They're putting on a show for their most loyal fans.
Well, I mean, there's a little devil's advocate to play there because they stream all these panels. Like, you could watch them all.
Not all of them.
They're making it accessible enough because they know it's an industry event now.
Yeah, but I mean, they stream some of the panels, and I was looking at the ones that they streamed, and they were all ones that I wouldn't watch if it was in my backyard.
Right. I'm just saying, like, it is a Disney fan club event, but even Disney knows that it's more than that now.
I think they'd be foolish. I think they'd be foolish not to capitalize on that. But what I'm saying is, I guess it only happens every 2 years, so it's not going to be every year. 3 weeks after Comic-Con, right. D23 is going to announce. In fact, I would say I'm surprised Marvel decided not to do a panel last year in a year where they didn't have D23 and did a panel this year in a year that they did have D23.
Well, because like John said, like, the criticism John had of Star Wars and Abrams is well taken. Like, Kevin Feige and Marvel, they don't care like what year it is or what, whether there's a D23 or not. He'll go up and give a presentation when he feels like he has enough to say. Like, last year there wasn't enough news, so they didn't go. This year they were unveiling like 10 movies. So it's like, okay, we have enough to say. That's like when they unveiled Phase 3, it was like a random Tuesday, and it wasn't an event. He called like an impromptu event when we found out about, at that time, it was Infinity War Part 1 and Part 2. Like, I think Marvel does it right. Like, they can't help that we're living now in this 24-hour news cycle, and people are constantly badgering him or badgering Marvel about, like, hey, what's next? Who's going to be in it? What Avengers are going to pop up? Blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm not sure how much at fault they are at creating this 24-hour news cycle that we live in. It feels like it's a lot of our fault and not as much their fault as we'd like it to be.
I'm sure they don't hate it.
I mean, I would say they're very much, at this point, they have a level of brand loyalty that is akin to, Steve Jobs era Apple, or, like Nike back in the Michael Jordan days. Like, that's the level of trust that people now have in them. Because the reality is, at this point, the properties that they are introducing are so B and C level that really, and coming out of coming out of the end game, where really, like, all their major players are now, with the exception of Thor, are basically now no longer involved. That, this is a major pivot point for them, but we just so implicitly trust them as a studio and as a company, not on the comic book side, but on the movie side, to make quality product because of their track record, that, we're just obsessed with it in a way that, like I said, the only comparison I can really make at this point is like those Apple conventions when Steve Jobs was still alive, as far as like the level of kind of fan obsession with it. And like, it's even weird things like, oh, DC's booth was in with Warner Brothers booth at San Diego Comic-Con. What's wrong with DC? Like, I don't think it's necessarily a fair comparison, because Marvel just has a whole other level of popularity going on with their movies. I think the point I was making is more just that, maybe it is unfair to them, and I don't want to say I was underwhelmed by the information that came out. I think Marvel's had a very good month overall, with the exception of the Spider-Man leak that really had nothing to do with them as far as leaking it. And it's not their fault that I have Deadline and I have Hollywood Reporter bookmarked on my iPad, and I didn't have that 6 years ago when Guardians of the Galaxy was coming out. That we want to find these things out, and we're reading Hollywood rags that used to be specifically industry things for Los Angeles, and now they've become these like national news sources. But I just think it takes the luster away from like the really exciting things that we're just constantly getting this constant stream of information, whether it's Marvel's fault or not, whether there's responding to it. Just to me, like, casting announcements are not really a marketing thing, but they've become it, right? And that's really that's the majority of the news, right? Is casting announcements. So,
and I think that was a problem at D23. I agree. Like the Kit Harrington thing I agree with you. But at Comic-Con, it really wasn't about, other than bringing out Mahershala Ali at the very end, it really wasn't about, it was more about, hey, these are the titles we're going to make.
And even the Mahershala Ali one was also an announcement that Blade was happening. So that made more sense. Again, like saying that Kat Dennings and Randall Park are going to be on WandaVision is just like, that's right. A press release that you put out on Variety and we find out about it, right? Like, it's just not a big deal, but it's now like an article on 5,000 news sites because that's how you market a movie now. And it's just very weird to me that that's the way we market things, I guess. But, again, I don't think the studios are at fault. I don't think, I think the fans are at fault to some extent. I think the studios do what they have to do to market these things and make them successful. But, at the end of the day, it does take a little bit of the allure away from like you're never going to see like an Independence Day where, they have one trailer a year in advance of the movie coming out and it gets people so freaking pumped, right? Or even a Guardians of the Galaxy where like that trailer was so good that everybody had to go see that movie. And now it's just, well, what other things are you announcing besides that trailer? How many 50 other things are going to make me excited for this? And that's just kind of a shame, I guess.
Yeah, I think that whole phenomenon is sort of what's given way to like, that's why the Marvel's post-credits stingers are so popular, I think, because it's sort of the last place where you can truly shock somebody.
I think we can all agree that D23 will be much better the year that they roll out Walt Disney's frozen body and reanimate him in front of all of his, supporters and fans. So,
is he frozen next to Ted Williams?
That's the rumor.
The best D23 is going to be when we do the show live from the bridge of the Halcyon.
Yeah, the maiden voyage of the Halcyon.
I think that's going to be great. I want to be in like a Grand Moff uniform.
Once again, a pretty jam-packed episode. A lot of content in there. A lot of tent.
So much IP, man.
Yeah, we covered a lot of IP, guys.
We sure did.
Thank everybody for listening. Johnny, thanks for coming on and giving up your Sunday night to talk with me and Bill about this stuff. It wouldn't have been the same conversation without you, that's for sure.
No, my pleasure, man. Any time. I love doing these things.
Bill, you got any parting words?
You know what I was just thinking? I think it would be even better if instead of Kit Harrington being the Black Knight, if they had just gotten Martin Lawrence to reprise his role as the Black Knight.
Now, there's an IP that hasn't been fully explored.
I wish I had thought of that joke like an hour ago.
I think bringing it back worked.
Other than that nugget, I've got nothing.
All right. So, everybody, once again, thanks for listening. Check us out on Twitter at BF Eat Pop Culture. Drop us an email at eatpopculture@gmail.com. And listen, if you want more of Johnny's soothing Dorset tones and the sound of him constantly lighting his pipe, head on over to baggedboardedinbox.com where we have a series of vlogs called, what are you calling it? JB reads it for you?
JB reads comics for you, yeah.
JB reads comic for you. So far, we've got a Spider-Man original clone saga. We've got The Boys. We've got a House of X. There was a fourth one. What was it?
I did Ecstatics, which I think only I'm excited for the Ecstatics. But that's fine.
in giant size Ecstatics. So they're really good. They're really deep dives. A lot of information. Super fun time to spend with Johnny. You can listen to one, while you're taking a shit or over your lunch break at work. So check that out. And that's all I got. So head over to Apple Podcasts, subscribe, rate, review. Check us out on Podcoin. Check us out on Overcast. Thanks for listening, everybody. And we will talk to you later this week with our bonus AEW episode. Be well.
Brought to you by the Odd Pod Squad.